everybody. This is Jackie here again with the Sexy Politico. I'm here with journalist James Carey. James and I are here this week just to talk about what's going on with the GOP, how what's going on with that nice with the speaker's election and what's really going on there. So, James, can you talk a little bit about yourself before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything?
Yeah, sure. Right now, I host a podcast called The Left is Dead. I also was a writer for several years. I wrote on foreign policy, mainly focused on Syria and Turkey, primarily in the Middle East, but also on Asia and things, and Russia, China, here and there. So
Mm-hmm.
just questioning sort of American policy across the board.
Alrighty. So, so Kevin McCarthy giving, do you think that he really, as the left media likes to talk about it, gave up as much? Do you think he gave up as much power as he really did? What do you think?
I think not any not in any significant way. I think some committee appointments are definitely important. Matt Gaetz being on, say, the rules committee is probably an issue, but Matt Gaetz is still self-interested, like most of them are. He's out fundraising or doing whatever he's doing. This is great he was sending fundraising emails during the whole debate, so I mean, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah,
He walked out all theatrically and everything like that, so he knew. And that's what you're seeing. I mean, obviously, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, that was her original stick, and she kind of teamed up with Kevin McCarthy this time. But as far as like the rules of, say, one representative can challenge the speaker, what would they would go into a vote again. We have 11, 12 votes next time, but it's still going to be McCarthy at the end of the day, just because I don't think there's any
there's
coherent
nobody
coup
else right
leader
now.
there. Yeah, there's nobody who could lead at anything from the bottom. There's no backbencher who can come out. I mean, like, it's not like the winning team looks great either. George Santos is hanging out with Marjorie Taylor Greene during the McCarthy vote, and, like, that's a whole other story. But nobody looks great, and there's no way to unify those factions enough until you get rid of, Long Island Republicans or something like that, the Northeast Republicans. But there's different parts of the country. The conspiracy people don't win everywhere. I'm in Michigan, and I saw that just this election where we had Secretary of State candidate, a gubernatorial candidate, and a lot of other, like, lower candidates were election denying right wingers. So you see them everywhere, school boards, wherever.
Yeah, I live in Southwest Michigan,
Okay.
and I know exactly what you're talking about. But do you think? I mean, what a lot of the people on the left don't even realize is that the whole one person being able to call a vote on the speakership, that was the way it was before Pelosi took office. So this isn't a brand new idea that the nut jobs came up with.
No, they're really just looking for a way to be a pain in McCarthy's ass, and that's anyone can do that. I mean, there's been cases of that in the Democratic. Look at Joe Manchin.
Yeah,
Matt
yeah.
Gaetz is just acting like the Joe Manchin of the Republicans at this point. He's going to be a downer every time you have to deal with them.
How about do you think Trump announcing as early as he did, is that going to hit the what everybody's assuming the DeSantis campaign?
I don't know what he's doing because he's not running very well.
No.
Maybe he figured out they won't arrest an ex-president, you know, because he doesn't seem to care about this campaign. He
No.
was came out with a big
I
announcement with the
I
trading
honestly think
cards.
he's just hiding. I think he's hiding money. That's really what I think he's doing. I think he's just hiding money in the campaign.
Yeah, I think it's just a scam. I mean, like, the Stop the Steal money went to lawyers in other cases that had nothing to do with the election or whatever. It was
Yeah.
about getting him out of trouble in, like, New York and things like that, where he didn't pay taxes. So he's just a con artist, and I think he's really figured out that nothing's going to happen to him, because I don't think anything's going to happen to him. He's an
I
ex
don't
president.
either.
You can't set that precedent by getting rid of an ex, like, federal. Look, Ron DeSantis and what's his name in Texas? They're allowed to Greg Abbott. They're allowed to
Abbott.
human traffic people. They're human trafficking
Yeah.
people. They're like
Yeah. What
Martha's
the
Vineyard, and
yeah.
nobody does
Why
anything.
hasn't anybody done anything about
Yeah.
Greg
So if you're
Abbott?
governor, if you can make it to the governor and not be arrested, obviously Trump might have figured out that he can't be touched. Because I think for a while he was worried there. He took classified documents and things like that, like an idiot, in the dumbest way possible. So I think he was more. He's a confined guy. He doesn't have a lot of friends.
Mm, he has a lot of people that want
He's
something from him.
yeah. He's got a lot of people who will say yes, sir. I mean, yeah, but that's the problem is because he has bad ideas.
Yeah. But so do we think that DeSantis has decided to run, or do you think that
Yeah,
he's taken a step back, or
I think he's waiting. He probably knows whether he will or not, but I don't think he wants to show any sign because he could cancel at the last minute, obviously, because I think that the last thing anyone in the GOP wants, and DeSantis is more like normie GOP as far as I'm concerned, that's the way he's being reflected in conservative media is like the moderate Trump who will get more
really?
votes or whatever. I mean, in some like extent, like yeah, DeSantis has been framed as more reasonable or more like viable. There are people who want to go with it and say Trump should sit out. There aren't all loyalists,
Well, yeah.
I mean, Trump couldn't even rally like all of them for McCarthy. So his sway over the party is clearly, and it's his most loyal followers from the last presidency he couldn't win over in the House too. So I mean, he's sort of losing some traction, but I think the last thing anybody wants is a Trump drag out fight for a year with Ron DeSantis on a national stage. Because by
Or
the
Greg
time,
Abbott?
yeah, anyone though is, I think by the time you hit the national election, the actual general election, if you've beaten Trump, there's still, you had to run against Trump and you're going to be tarnished by that no matter what. And I think there's still clearly a huge base of the Republican Party that loves him, so they will follow him, I think. And if the establishment, even the ones that have sort of accepted the MAGA agenda or whatever, but they want it without Trump, I think they don't, they'll go up against it. And then you're going to see that. I think it's pretty common now anyway.
Do you think that Trump would go third party?
No, he's too lazy. It was like when they were saying elect him Speaker of the House, he doesn't want a real job or to like do anything. It was he's thought about third party before and he didn't want to do it because it's a lot of work. And it wasn't until he could actually he knew he could hijack the Republican Party because he tried in 2012. He did he thought he floated
Yeah,
out
he
there,
ran
yeah,
in
I'm running,
2012.
yeah, I'm running, and then he immediately dropped out and quit. And he's like, nah, I'm good. And it was 2016 when he saw like, oh, Hillary Clinton is like a good opportunity for me in the Republican Party because there's no star,
It
there's no
was
star in
it
any
was
party.
Jeb and Ted Cruz.
Yeah,
That was
that's
it.
wild too.
And
Yeah, another Bush
Ted
brother.
Cruz was Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush. I mean, Jeb Bush is the most boring Republican I can think of.
Yeah, but I think that was the problem on both sides. It was like, here's a dynasty figure for you, and you have to vote for them.
Here's this dynasty or this
Yeah,
dynasty.
yeah. And luckily, I don't think Chelsea Clinton ever cares about running for office. But I don't think the Bush twins do either. But yeah, I
They're
mean,
in the media right now.
yeah, and well, they're also outdated. I mean, Liz Cheney was a standalone for a minute there as like someone who came out of this old political family, but she couldn't cut it. And now you're seeing these sort of like nouveau riche petite bourgeois families like Matt Gates' dad or something like that, guys who kind of got
Yeah.
rich in their generation with like a pool cleaning company or something weird, something that's just clearly an industry of like neoliberalism, like 90s, like small business owner mentality. And you see those guys being like, they're the new generation, the ones who got kind of big, or the new generation of like backing the Republican Party. It's kind of like how fascism was in Italy. It was like the farm owners in the north that backed Mussolini. It wasn't necessarily the huge corporate interest there, but
No.
it didn't matter in the end, right?
No. It just we have you have Biden on the left. He's, as far as anybody knows, he's running in 2024. There's no
Yeah.
indication that he's not. And
Who else
so
will?
it's, yeah, that they've screwed over Kamala,
Yeah.
completely screwed her over. So really, who else would do it?
Yeah, I can't
They're
believe
not
it.
going to pull Clinton out of mothballs.
No, they can't. I mean, the right still yells about Hillary Clinton like she's
In
running
her
because yeah,
emails.
yeah, they still yell. Yeah, Ted Cruz tweeted the other day like, "Oh, we find out tomorrow Hillary's emails were in Biden's garage, or Hillary's server was in Biden's garage too." Like, okay, and that's a senator. So I mean, you can't get much crazier than that. But the Democrats have nobody who like Mayor Pete, maybe Gretchen Whitmer. Honestly, next time, that's who I
Yeah,
see.
yeah. I mean, they seem to be talking to her, but I don't know. Maybe she'll take what's her face's Senate seat. God,
Oh,
what was her
Stabenow,
name?
yeah.
Yeah, Stabenow's
Yeah, I forgot
retired,
she's
but
retiring. Yeah, I don't know who's gonna. They better hope a Democrat wins that, because then they're just stuck with whoever it is. But it's Detroit, so I'm pretty sure they'll be okay.
yeah, they're fine.
And it's a Senate seat, yeah, so it's massive amounts of people. But yeah, and honestly, the Republicans failed here so bad, and I think that's the big conflict here too. Is the thing that people want the right wing base to run on also doesn't benefit, it doesn't benefit them. The Democrats are stumbling all over it, and they have nobody to run because of like trying to tamp this down, like any discontent with capitalism. But the right is doing this thing to themselves now where it's like this cultural thing because they can't actually do anything about capital. I mean, they're not going to redistribute wealth, obviously. So
Nope.
they're doing this culture war thing where that's, in fact, they've taken the economics out of Marxism. That's what Marxism is. It's cultural stuff now and incorrect. So, this idea that, they're grooming your kids, the drag time story hour, all that stuff failed during the election. Look how bad it came out. They lost seats across the country, especially where people were the most wild with it. Carrie Lake is
Yeah.
still filing lawsuits in Arizona,
And then
and
we've
she
I mean,
was,
they've lost the abortion issue.
yeah, yeah, that was a huge, the court being packed is not a favor to them, I think.
No, no. The
It didn't do what they wanted, first off, which was appoint Trump president again, and then it hasn't done, it's kind of screwed them over in the end because actually right wing policies are really unpopular.
Yeah, and what also, I mean, what you don't, what a lot of people don't take into consideration is that the court's like, okay, they're more 10th Amendment, so they send everything back to states. And so if the states choose to keep abortion legal, then the Supreme Court's like, yep, the state voted that way.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's why, people want the Republican Party to pass national abortion ban or something like that.
But then they were the ones who were wanting it to go to the states.
Yeah, well, they don't really like states' rights when they're not actually, they don't think out their strategy. Again, they wanted Donald Trump as like Speaker of the House so they could impeach Kamala and Joe, and then he could be president. It was a
Yeah,
big
because that's
plan.
how it works,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, not another Democrat or anything. You get put in.
Because you can just make an ex-president president again.
Right, yeah. Well, that was always their plot. It was like, yeah, we'll put in. There's been a weird like QAnon adjacent kind of one going on since 2020. That was like, we'll make him speaker because anyone can be speaker. So then he'll get to be president from there once he impeaches Kamala and Biden. So, but that's a whole other world of like the ones who think maybe he's still in charge or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
those can't come to the
QAnon
forefront.
is Q QAnon is a rabbit hole that I haven't really gotten too deep into, mostly
Hmm.
because I have children and I
Hmm.
don't have the time and the energy to go into that.
It's
But
really
it's yeah,
a theory of everything. It's everything, every conspiracy you've ever heard, if you can think of it, it's been incorporated under the umbrella in some way. And it's the thing is like when you talk about it peaked during the pandemic, I would say like recruitment for this sort of conspiracy of everything idea that like was a sort of Q branch. It was the main branch of Q, like the Save the Children and Wayfair stuff and all the anti-vaccine stuff really
yeah.
blossomed in 2020. But it's such a wild theory that like when you get to talking to anyone without Trump as a unifying figure, it's really hard to sell because when you start talking among these people, like they all come from a giant umbrella where some of them can believe JFK Jr. is alive, some of them can believe that the other one's favorite company is actually a front for trafficking or whatever. So they can easily come into conflict, and you see they come into conflict all the time. Whether they turn on senators, Trump turns on everyone. They turn on every Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro are splitting them up right now. So there's always somebody on the right who's just more destructive than the next guy.
Mm, but then what are they going to actually do for the American people?
Nothing. I mean, I don't know. That's the thing is they talk about like what oh, we want more families and like homeowners and things like that. And why? I mean, you're not like getting more mortgage. You're not getting people in homes. You're not passing any laws to make a stable family more possible. You're not increasing the wages. You're not getting anyone health care. So
How about
why?
maternity leave? I mean,
Yeah,
Trump said he would guarantee maternity leave. When's that
you
happened?
yeah. I mean, And that's the funny thing is like the people who vote for him, it's not like they care in the end either. They'll use it as like a beating stick on the left, and the Democrats will help them carry that sometimes. They'll
Mm.
go along with it, like, yeah, oh well, they are right that the left doesn't have a plan to help families, and it'll be things like universal health care would be a huge help for
Yeah.
family planning if you don't have to worry about the major 20 some thousand plus dollars for delivering a child. It gets a lot different. It's suddenly, and I'm sure it's more than that now. It's been 10 years since I had that bill, so I'm sure that
I was 15 with my 4-year-old with
yeah,
insurance.
yeah, it's a lot. And that's what I'm saying. If they did something like that, no, yeah, but what they do is, Marjorie Taylor Greene and that her group kind of passed that "Don't Kill a Child That's Born" bill, in the House. It's no post-birth abortions, which wasn't a thing anyway. So it's stuff like that. It's
Don't
just media
murder.
stunts.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it's
God, don't
yeah,
murder.
yeah. It's a murder law. We already have those.
Don't
Exactly. So yeah,
murder babies. My God.
they think you're bringing an 18-month-old in, and just getting rid of it. It's wild. So, but that's all they have is show stuff, and again, the show stuff doesn't always work out for them. The drag queen story hour is kind of worn down. The thing, yeah, people can find anything. The brigade now, too. The right is like obsessed with these moralist campaigns against, like, a hospital that's giving somebody treatment for COVID or whatever. They just brigade something, run it into the ground, and then move on to the next thing, because that's what you have to do. You can't keep too focused, because you'll realize your material conditions aren't actually improving. That's what the right's gonna, back to what we
Yeah.
were talking about. That's what the right's gonna keep doing. But I think, like the gas prices, the inflation, the things they were actually talking about early in the election that they dropped, like those are the things that were winning them higher poll numbers. And I think that's what's you're going to see more of that. You're going to see more problems, and you're going to see more economic issues, especially as like wars in Europe unfold. China is still dealing with COVID in a
Yes.
major way. These things are really going to hold up things.
I lived there for 3 years, and I have friends in the Shanghai region. And
Mm-hmm.
while zero COVID policy isn't as strictly enforced, at least in that region that my friends live in, it's still an issue.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you're going to see, and plus there's just so much unnecessary tension. The Pelosi visit to Taiwan, for example, things like that, or the Ukrainian issue. As much
But
as I don't agree with the invasion of Ukraine, I do wonder about like dumping billions in weapons that are going to be untraced in Ukraine,
yeah,
as the U.S. tends to do.
I
And I
mean, what do
think
you think? I mean, do you think that we're gonna end up with boots on the ground in the near future?
in Ukraine, I don't think so, because I think that it's up for I think honestly it sucks, because it seems like a lamb for the slaughter, and it's up for sacrifice essentially, because it's not economically anything the US needs. The pipeline being cut off to Europe actually does us favors. The pound's been dropping as the dollar stays kind of stable. It's like this whole thing where like we're willing to freeze out Europe. So I don't think we're actually going to go to war with Ukraine if we're willing to go that far, where like Germans can't afford gas, and like these
Yeah,
huge NATO allies can't, they're mad.
they're freezing.
Yeah. And like to have like your oldest allies in this coalition that's against the supposed power to the east, it's going to be a problem, because you're literally starving them out now, and you're starving parts of like the global south out now too, and you can't get an alliance together to save your life. And I think
Yeah, but
that
it
it's
feels as though
still not
Biden's
worth
just
it
so
though.
afraid. He's just so afraid after ha- the what the media cluster of pulling out of Afghanistan, that
Yeah,
he doesn't want to put boots on the ground unless basically they'd have to Pearl Harbor us in order to for him to do that. It feels like.
I just don't think that I think the US sees it fine with it being shut down. It was fine. They didn't want the Minsk 2 pipelines from Russia, either. So that's if they can shut off both and import more. We have tons of natural gas here. So if they can export more of that, like that's good for them. And I don't think anyone's going to go, Ukraine is incredibly corrupt. Ukraine is it's a lower GDP per capita than Russia is actually. It's incredibly poor. It's not like there isn't developed parts of it, but there is parts, that also now that are devastated by war. but a lot of
Yeah.
it was underdeveloped and a lot of it was very corrupt. And that was before 2014 and after. It was just different corrupt people were put in charge. But I think that it's not worth anything to anyone to actually go there. Look at even their next door neighbors like Poland and everything. We're not going to give them. There were the biggest hawks on Russia aren't even give them planes or anything like that to use. So clearly, even though they're still scared of Russia and that's why they want their planes, and they're not even willing to commit to actually fighting them there to that extent. Um, even and I also think there's an issue with the U.S. supplies. We're almost out of like javelins and stuff because we have sent so many to Ukraine, and arms manufacturers can't keep up. These javelins are $250,000 a piece too, so the spending is out of control with them. And Zelensky wanted like I don't know 500 a day or something like that for in one of his requests. So the U.S. as much as they love making arms, they can't keep up with this, but I think they're trying to switch arms manufacturing back towards a more like missile based thing where you can sell missile systems all over the world again, like the Cold War, and that's kind of. But this is great for the tank manufacturers and stuff like that because I think people want the old Cold War systems back because it's how they knew how to make money. The war on terror was harder to make money with. You didn't
Yeah.
even get the oil, you know.
Get the oil, sell weapons to shady people, and everybody makes a buck.
Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, I think that the war on terror proved like, oh well, we actually, we can't get the oil because like we go in and destroy everything so hard that like turns out you can't rebuild the infrastructure overnight, and especially in a country that's mad about you being there, which I think most countries would be at this point. That's why we haven't invaded, say, Venezuela or something, because there's just
Man,
enough
imagine that.
enough
Imagine
cultural
trying to,
memory,
yeah,
and the same in the
Nicaragua.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. These places where we watch these sort of coups take place and cheer them on, maybe, and maybe encourage them, work in them, like in Bolivia or something like that. We still don't want to directly step in because we know as soon as our handprints are like on something, this is a problem for everyone who lives there. Iran, look at that. Even with the protests there, the first thing the US has to do is denounce them because what's going to turn somebody against, protest faster in Iran than saying the US is backing this or, striking their biggest commander who'd been fighting the war on terror from their side for 10 years,
Right.
killing him in an Iraqi base. That's going to upset a lot of people, starving them out in Venezuela. They think people don't know who's doing that, and they understand what the sanctions are. Cubans understand what the blockade is. They're not stupid.
Yeah. Honestly, I just where do you think all this is going to lead into 2024, 2028? What do you think
I
our foreign policy is going to look like?
I think it'll be continue to be more isolationist. Because obviously both parties are very committed to that now. It's incredibly hard for anyone to think of making peace or think of backing down on certain positions. Like you know, Israel is a big one. Democrats have never really. Obama's biggest gesture was symbolically abstaining from the vote at the end of his presidency over the expansion of settlements already deemed illegal, basically under Israeli law and international law. This was nothing. And much like, most of the Democratic gestures that way kind of are towards Israel. It'll be a symbolic thing for Palestinians and in the most legalistic way. Whereas obviously the GOP loves Israel. They love, Zionism, right wing Zionism. They love Netanyahu, and there's clearly nobody who can assemble a coalition there to oppose him. There's never going to be enough unity there right in the foreseeable future. So I think that we're just going to continue to like sort of back hardline these positions, but at the same time isolate, say, China, Russia. And I honestly don't know what happens there because I think it's a bad idea. Like I said, there's a lot of Cold Warriors and neocons were looking for this new Cold War, but I don't think they calculated that China was actually going to be an economic powerhouse by now. You know,
Really?
I don't. I think for a long time they thought this would remain like the world's sort of like sweatshop and light manufacturing and things like that. Like, I mean, they still consider, a lot of people still have a stereotypical image of like all junk being made in China or whatever,
Yeah,
and it's a
but
technological
that's moved
powerhouse.
more
It's an
down
yeah.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah, exactly. Where labor is cheaper because the Chinese have, pulled a bunch of people above the international poverty line, and they have a huge tech market. They have huge, international sectors and like global companies.
Okay.
They're building. high-speed rail in Africa, like they are a powerhouse. And I don't think anyone calculated like, oh, this isn't like the Soviet Union where we don't do trade with them ourselves a bunch and nobody else really trades with them in areas we control. Latin America, we obviously fought pretty hard for that. And Middle East, we fought pretty hard for that. So if we could do anything about it, they would never have economic ties with the Soviet
I
Union. But
mean,
now everyone has ties with China.
yeah, but with Xi Jinping basically declaring himself president for life or whatever he calls himself now, do you think that that's going to change anything?
Um, I don't I don't think so. I think Xi's policy has been pretty consistent. I mean, he is not an expansionist. They're not sailing in our waters every day.
No.
So,
Although he's still pretty hardline on Taipei and all that stuff.
right. And I think the thing is there though, like he is, almost like in North Korea to some extent, like there's an order there. What was in China before the Communist Party for like a long time, it was a lot of disorder and a lot of fighting thanks to the colonial powers intervening and,
Yeah.
cutting things into three between the big three powers, the US and France and everybody getting involved, British involvement. I think a lot of people see stability under the Communist Party. And I think that's what Xi is like guaranteeing when he, makes himself president for life. He wants to associate that stability of the party in the modern era with himself and promise that he'll provide stability for life, essentially. So he'll be a sort of icon of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think honestly, we just also need to see about the COVID policies as well, because
Yeah,
that's
that
really the
is.
more destabilizing force that's going on there.
It is strange to see protests so large there and see them actually make it through to media here. Obviously Hong Kong is a very different situation as far as
Oh,
media
God.
goes. People don't seem to understand, because everyone was waiting for like the PLA to roll over there and fix it or whatever, which is China's not like Taiwan. There's no Taipei, and there's no reason to sort of move on it like that because there's the economy around them is completely run by China. The Philippines, Vietnam, like they can try and move out of that sphere of orbit, but it doesn't matter.
They
China
can
has the
wish
money
and
to
they can
economically
hope.
blockade them.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is also that they just like that freedom of information that they have in Hong Kong. You go to Hong Kong
Mm-hmm.
and your phone works correctly and you can email and text and Instagram and do all the things that you can't do in China.
Yeah, I think a lot of China's power too will come from just sort of soft power projection. Essentially what they've learned from watching us. If you have somebody in power and you tell them I won't ask any questions, here's some money and here's what I, would like to do in your country, then that's what you do. We have people like that and they have people like that now, sort of, I
Yeah.
think. If they tell somebody, a country in Africa, like, I don't care who picks up the phone tomorrow if they're in charge and want to do business, that'll happen. But I mean, again, this in the US has done it forever. So I mean, everyone's just learning from us. When Russia was sort of Putin was really starting to be seen as a genius by the right, it was under Obama. And it was because he was countering such like buck standard liberal policy as far as like what you'd think a sort of American sort of he was backing off on the projection of American power to some extent. He like the leading from behind in Libya and things like that. The idea that the U.S. was backing up any major wars sort of made Putin look like a genius because you could tell what a guy like Obama would do or what his foreign policy staff would do when, say, something like the red line in Syria gets crossed. And then Putin steps in before a major crisis because the U.S. does not want to invade another Middle Eastern country and be bogged down there.
No.
And Putin ended up looking like a genius because, yeah, these are very like clear things no president's going to do right now. There's no way we're going back to Afghanistan either, right? It's just never happening. People may complain about it. They may point to that when they talk about Biden or whatever, but no one's going to
Nobody
sponsor the.
wants to put
Yeah,
soldiers.
no, no,
They don't want to send them overseas unless they have to.
and
Basically,
nobody's going to sponsor
unless
that
somebody
bill.
actually
Yeah,
attacks us, it isn't going to happen in the next 15 years.
yeah, and I think that was sort of a trend you saw before 9/11 with the Gulf War being the first major war after Vietnam. It was sort of a tech show, right? I mean, what was on
Yeah, it
TV?
was.
Smart bombs, right? The video camera from the bomb's nose would be on CNN. So that was how everything was built. And Obama kind of returned to that policy of well, we're going to have this technological warfare. You don't have to get involved. We have these drones. We have special forces teams that can project power in like, very specific ways. And if you just have that, we don't have to have these big engagements anymore. And I don't know that that works anymore, because I think that the drones and things like that tend to actually make people pretty angry when they know that your umbrella of surveillance is still hanging over them. It's what Tulsi Gabbard advocated for on Tucker after we pulled out of Afghanistan, saying, "Oh, it's going to be okay because we still have drones and special forces that can, drop a bomb on somebody getting water for their family or whatever, like they did the day after we left." Right? I think that our foreign policy is just gonna continue to anger people because we're really struggling to maintain dominance here. And I think that you're gonna see, as we get more desperate, we're gonna and continue to make dumber decisions, continue to put out inferior products like the F-35 and the Patriot. This is as far as our weapon sales go. I think you're just gonna see us kind of blow it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't see anything good coming from it, because much like the economic stuff, there's nobody who offers any solution, is there?
Not yet.
Not that they're letting rise to the top. Not that they're,
No.
Democratic Party's crushed every star in it.
What do we have? Yeah, we have like Beto and Buttigieg right now.
Yeah, two people. Buttigieg had to steal the Iowa caucus and then got 1% of the vote like the rest of the time he was in the race. And yeah, Beto, who never got any percent. Even the vice
No.
president was never
But he-
really on the board. The vice
But he
president they
but he
appointed.
looked good in Texas.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Since times he lost in Texas. Yeah. And Joe appointed, as I'm sure, a favor to the donors who kind of went with him in the end, who were unsure about him. Joe appointed Kamala as his VP, someone who did not make it on the actual, above the margin of error in any polls.
No.
So there's just this big, and the Democratic Party is still run by like all the names everyone's familiar with back at the headquarters, and I think you'd find all these people are more. It was like Hillary's campaign. It was like 3 consultants. They're donor targeted, and they're going to keep smashing down talent like that. I think it's a stupid thing to do. And the Republican Party, their talent is going to be just continue to be more awful.
Yeah. AOC is too young to run.
Yeah, and I don't know what her strategy is. I don't really
I don't
follow
know
her
what
too closely.
I don't know what she would want.
And I fear that there is some people 4D chess Obama types and stuff, like, oh, if you really followed AOC, like, you'd understand what she's doing, like, as essentially QAnon for the left or whatever,
Well, I
like,
mean,
she's got a plan.
It's not like Obama didn't have a plan for the presidency.
Uh,
He stumbled his way into the Illinois State Senate, and
yeah, I
then
mean,
he was a great speaker, but it wasn't like he was like, I'm gonna be president when I grow up.
right. Yeah, he's not a Ted Cruz who was saying that in like 5th grade, but
Yeah.
Obama did have a plan as far as like what he was, he wrote that letter to David Brooks when he first got elected, because David Brooks like, I'm scared of socialism. And Obama wrote him a letter like, don't worry, I believe in the Reagan Revolution. I believe in neoliberal economics. I'm continuing, like, I may have beat Hillary Clinton, but I'm continuing the Clintonian policies from the 90s without any interruption. He made that promise to Capitol, and from there on, I mean, the guy went in the room with all the bank heads and said, like, what can I do to help you in 2008?
Yeah.
Like, and the ball was already
I can't
dropped.
imagine if Elizabeth Warren had been in that room.
Yeah, and the ball. Well, it depends on Republican Warren or Democrat Warren.
Oh,
like,
good point. Good
yeah.
point.
But that's the thing, is like, all of them still, though, believe in this sort of neoliberal idea. They believe in privatization. Maybe not Warren so much. She never really spoke on it because it never came up. But most of them believe in like privatization, or offing government responsibility to somebody else. That was the wars, or making the wars more tech specific. That was, we'll hand this responsibility off to like the people who build drones. And a lot of government services are all handed off to private companies at this point. The charter schools are pushed for by both parties, and they just want to, and as they do that, they continue to cut public institutions to make them look worse. So there's nobody really proposing anything that's going to get anyone excited. If the culture war stuff doesn't do it, I don't know what will.
Yeah. Well, we're hitting the end of our time. So is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I would just say go check out The Left Is Dead on anywhere you get podcasts, and I don't know, it's a good conversation.
Thank you very much, and I'll be speaking with you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks.